Now at 10, under arrest and accused of igniting the Palisades fire. Tonight, the feds say a 29-year-old Uber driver deliberately started the blaze that eventually became one of the most destructive fires in California history. Hello, I'm Juan Fernandez.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Susie Suh, and this is KCAL News at 10. 12 people died in the Palisades fire, 6,800 structures destroyed, 23,000 acres burned. And now tonight, the shocking news that the fire may have been intentional.
We have extensive team coverage for you tonight on the suspect, the allegations, and the evidence the feds say they have.
Our Hunter Sowers leads us off tonight live in Pacific Palisades, where people there reacting to this arrest. Hunter.
Well, Susie, as you can imagine, a lot of hurt and a lot of anger here because much of this community still looks like what you see behind me, a lot of destruction. I will tell you that those I spoke to today said one of the worst parts about this is learning that that fire smoldered for days before it was detected.
It was just a kick in the gut.
People in the Palisades and Malibu react to news of an arrest in the deadly fire 8 months later.
This is just another terrible reminder of how bad it is. And it just makes it worse. So this was a fire that could have been prevented.
Doug Stewart was the mayor of Malibu when the fire started.
I can't tell you the anger that I feel. I've thought about this all day.
Evil people do evil things.
Anger ignited across the region Wednesday after investigators announced the arrest of 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht, saying he started a fire on New Year's Eve on a hiking trail above the community. The LAFD put it out, but no one realized embers still burned below ground for 6 days and roared back to life when the 100-mile-an-hour winds blew in.
Heavy winds caused this underground fire to surface and spread above ground, causing what became known as the Palisades Fire, one of the most destructive wildfires in Los Angeles City history.
In the last 8 months, investigators with the ATF looked into 200 leads, collecting 13,000 pieces of evidence, underscoring digital proof like Rinderknecht's geolocation from his phone, linking him to the crime, including allegations that when he finished his shift as an Uber driver on January 1st, he made his way to Temescal Canyon Ridge Trail and lit a fire nearby. They say he then tried calling 911, reported the blaze, but never left the scene.
As soon as he saw the fire trucks were headed to the location, he turned around and went back up there. And he took some video and watched them fight the fire.
Rinderknecht was arrested at a home near Orlando, Florida today, where he'd been staying recently. Acting U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley says Rinderknecht lived and worked in the Palisades at the time of the fires and knew the area well. They also cited disturbing AI images found in his phone showing an imaginary city burning down.
That was crazy. I would love to meet that guy and give him a piece of my mind.
For one Pali Charter High student whose life was redefined by the fire, he says once he learned of the arrest, his whole perspective about that night changed.
Now that I know it was somebody, it's like kind of changes my point of view about it because it's crazy. I mean, definitely there's some anger there.
A lot of anger. Now, that suspect does not have a criminal history, but is accused of lying to investigators. We do know that at this point he faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Reporting in the Palisades tonight, Hunter Sowers, KCAL News.
Hunter, thank you. Part of today's bombshell revelations, investigators said they believe the Palisades fire was actually burning underground for a week before it exploded on January 7th.
Now, Tom Wade has been talking to experts about what they call holdover fires, Tom.
Right. So, I mean, when you hear this, you kind of think, how is this possible, right? So that's what we were thinking, too. Right. So we reached out to one of the top experts in the country. Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around how fire could burn for days without being detected. But the wildfire expert we spoke with says the phenomenon is real, and even the most experienced fire crews and sophisticated imaging equipment may miss them. In the ash and ruins of the Palisades, it's been a search for answers. Investigators are now revealing the fire that wiped out one of LA's most iconic communities was burning for a week, simmering underground, waiting to explode.
What's called a ground fire, where it's burning the roots and organic material under the surface.
Professor Craig Clements is one of California's top fire, weather, and behavior experts.
What happens is a surface fire, which is typically what we see burning in the grass and shrubs, that can get put out by firefighters, and it's fully contained, and so everything on the surface has been extinguished. but it can actually burn into the root system and burn underground where you would not see any smoke. And it can continue to smolder there for multiple days before, a big wind event could then, add more oxygen and cause the fire to reignite and then bring it back to the surface.
Detecting these fires can be very difficult.
Potentially, you could use some infrared cameras at the surface, but again, they only see the surface. And depending on how deep that area is, smoldering, it may be hard to detect even with infrared imagery and imaging systems.
For victims of the Palisades fire, Wednesday's developments are a lot to process. Chuck Peel was among those who lost his home. We first spoke with him in late January when residents were allowed back inside the fire zone to sift through the ruins. Peel says he's still trying to make sense of how the fire could have smoldered for so long before turning into a raging inferno.
Maybe over time that was there, and all it needed was the other remaining element of a fire, which is wind. I'm not a fireman, I don't do any of that, but it comes, with everybody, so much focus on that fire. I just find it hard that it wasn't picked up somewhere, somehow through all of the sources, and that's not a blame game. That's not at all. But that is a very, you couldn't create that scenario, even in a lab, I don't think.
Another so-called holdover fire happened in the Oakland Hills back in 1991. 25 people died, 150 injured, and almost 3,000 homes were destroyed. The fire started a day before. Firefighters thought they had it out, but it was still burning underground. Susie?
All right, Tom, thank you so much. And late today, the LAFD releasing its long-awaited investigation into the fire and the department's response to it.
Mike Rogers, you've been going through it here at the desk. What does it say about the fire and the firefight?
Yeah, the 70-page after-action report that the LAFD released today really gives a lot of insight into what those firefighters were facing the moments this fire broke out. And it talks a lot about a lack of communication, be it radios that just were on the wrong frequencies or simply not communicating the needs. And one of those issues in communications was issuing evacuations and clearly issuing them to citizens. And I want to show you what that ultimately resulted in was this bottleneck. You remember the LA County Fire Department dozer had to come in and push parked cars out of the way after people abandoned them when they were trying to flee the fire. The report says that a staging area was positioned right here, causing this bottleneck and preventing LAFD resources from getting up into the hill. The report also talks about this, hydrants. We talked about this a lot. The hydrants went dry at some point during the fire. The report says that after the hydrants went dry, incident commanders tried to identify water tenders that could come in and be a secondary water supply for those fire crews. Now, the report says the incident commanders, instead of going to the city's emergency operations center, which had tenders readily available, they tried to find them within the fire system. Ultimately, the report says when they did identify them with the emergency management team, it was late, and when those tenders started to come in, they wanted escorts, something that LA City Fire says they just weren't able to do. And then there was this.
The LAFD has called us to ask people watching, anybody who is an LAFD firefighter, to give them your availability to see if you can come and help fight this fire.
That was the first time in my career that a fire department has called a desk, our desk, and asked us to put out their phone number to get a message out to off-duty firefighters from the LAFD to come in. We put that phone number on TV, online, on a ticker at the bottom of our screen. LAFD says ultimately that caused so many issues. This report details how they got hundreds and hundreds of calls into that line. The report says they were getting a call once every 30 seconds from people all over the country offering to help. Ultimately, it bogged that line up so much it became inoperable, and firefighters who work for the city of LA who needed to call that number ultimately could not. Tonight, the mayor's office releasing a statement saying that they have made a lot of changes since then, including 19 leadership changes. And we know at the top of those leadership changes was the former fire chief, guys.
Mike, let's go back and talk a little bit more about the evacuation part of this after-action report.
Yeah, you hear leave your car, don't leave your car. We're hearing both messages from first responders, and that was on January 7th. And as our Elise Martinez was reporting live on Sunset, here she is, people started streaming down the hill telling our Elise they were ordered to abandon their cars and flee. Listen to this.
Where's your car?
The cops say you have to leave it.
Did they tell you to get out of your car? Did they tell you to get out of your car?
Yes. The fire came right down to the road, and the fire department came up and said, get out of your cars now.
Obviously, lots of chaos on that day as this was happening, Mike. Why the mixed messages? Does the report talk about that?
It does, and I was just actually looking for the exact kind of phrasing in the report. But essentially what happened here is the LAFD acknowledges that the evacuation orders were listed too late. In fact, at 11:25 a.m., an evacuation order was requested by a battalion chief on scene, but the dispatcher asked for clarification, and the battalion chief never got back to him. It wasn't until 12:07 that those evacuations were finally ordered. The report acknowledges that there was no clear communication to the public about where they should go. And ultimately, the public chose to evacuate the best way they thought fit, and ultimately led them right into all those LAFD apparatus that were in a staging area down below. The report also talks about how LAFD could not find members from the LAPD who had a clear knowledge of how to conduct these evacuations in this area at that time. Something the report identifies a lot about is evacuations and communication with the public.
Mike, it took us 10 months just to get to this point. Are we expecting more in the future?
This is potentially the final after-action report. Certainly we'll follow this through the criminal proceedings now as it goes with that suspect, but I don't expect any additional information from the city unless there's some, earth-shattering revelation that they didn't include in this report.
And I'm sure you'll have it for us.
Yeah, not just one detail that went wrong, a number of things causing this sort of perfect storm.
It really does seem like there's just so many small things that really played a role, whether it be guys on the wrong channels, radio channels, not calling things in soon enough. There's a lot of small things that bubbled up into a really big thing.
And add Mother Nature to it, the winds, and all that happened just got what we had here back in January. Mike, thank you very much. And make sure to stay with KCAL News and KCALnews.com for the very latest on the Palisades fire arrest and the investigation. The suspect is due back in federal court in Florida on October 17th.